Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Storyline English. I'm really happy you're here with me today. Get comfortable, relax your mind, and let's open the door to another story together. Today, we travel far back in time. We go to a land of golden deserts, great rivers, and ancient temples. We go to Egypt. And we listen to the story of a woman who changed the world. Her name was Cleopatra. She was a queen. She was a ruler. She was a fighter. And she was someone who never gave up, even when everything around her was falling apart. This is her journey. And as you listen, you will learn English through her story. So take a slow breath, open your ears, and let us begin. The story of Cleopatra begins in the year 69 BC in the great city of Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria was one of the most beautiful cities in the ancient world. It had wide streets, tall libraries, and the light of many candles burning through the night. Ships came from every direction, carrying gold, silk, and new ideas. It was a city full of life, full of sound, and full of power. And it was here, inside a great royal palace by the sea, that Cleopatra was born. She was born into the family of the Ptolemies, a dynasty of kings and queens who had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. But this family was not simple or peaceful. It was a family of secrets, rivalry, and danger. Brothers fought brothers, sisters plotted against sisters, and the prize was always the same: the throne of Egypt. Cleopatra's father was Ptolemy XII, a king known to many as the flute player because of his love for music. He was not a strong king. He depended on the growing power of Rome to keep his place on the throne. And the people of Egypt did not always respect him. Young Cleopatra watched all of this. She watched her father struggle. She watched the courtiers whisper. She watched the shadows move around the palace walls. And even as a child, she understood something very important. In this world, knowledge was survival. So she studied. She listened. She learned. She became fluent in 9 languages, including Egyptian, which was remarkable because most of her ancestors had never bothered to learn the language of the people they ruled. She studied mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. She was not just preparing to be a queen, she was preparing to be a leader. But could a young girl, raised in a palace full of danger, truly hold on to the most powerful throne in the ancient world? That question would follow her for the rest of her life. As Cleopatra grew older, the world around her became more difficult. Her father, King Ptolemy XII, faced serious problems. The people of Egypt were unhappy. They paid heavy taxes. There was not enough food in some regions. And Rome, the great empire to the north and west, was growing stronger every year. Ptolemy knew that without Rome's support, he might lose his throne. So he made a decision that many Egyptians found shameful. He paid a huge amount of money to the Roman Senate to keep their friendship. He borrowed this money and this only made things worse. The people of Egypt lost more and more respect for him. There were riots in the streets of Alexandria. Ptolemy was even forced to leave Egypt for a time, going to Rome to ask for help. While he was gone, one of his daughters, Berenice, took the throne. When Ptolemy returned with Roman soldiers, he took back his power, and Berenice was executed. Cleopatra watched this. She was perhaps 12 or 13 years old. She saw how quickly power could change hands. She saw how cruelty could be part of ruling, and she understood that loyalty was a rare and precious thing. But she also saw something else. She saw that her father, even with all his problems, fought to return. He did not simply give up. He made alliances. He used every tool available. And she stored that lesson deep inside her mind. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BC, Cleopatra was 18 years old. According to the tradition of their family, she was to rule together with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old. They were even married, as was the custom of their royal family, although this marriage was purely political. She was now a queen. But her brother's powerful advisors had other plans. They wanted to remove Cleopatra and rule Egypt themselves through the young boy. The struggle for the throne was about to begin. From the first days of her reign, Cleopatra faced opposition. The men around her young brother, Ptolemy XIII, worked against her. They whispered to the boy king that his sister was dangerous. They told him she wanted all the power for herself. Slowly, they pushed her out. Within 3 years of her father's death, Cleopatra was removed from the throne. She was forced to leave Egypt altogether. She went east to the border region between Egypt and the land that is now called Syria. She was not a queen in a golden palace anymore. She was a leader in a camp, surrounded by a small army of loyal soldiers and supporters. Many people in this situation would feel hopeless, but Cleopatra was not ready to stop. She began to gather more soldiers. She used her skills, her charm, and her sharp intelligence to win people to her side. She sent messages. She made promises. She planned. And she waited for the right moment to return. That moment came in the year 48 BC, when something extraordinary happened far away from Egypt. 2 of Rome's greatest generals, Julius Caesar and Pompey, were fighting a civil war for control of Rome. Pompey was defeated and fled east. He came to Egypt hoping for help, but the advisors around young Ptolemy XIII made a fatal mistake. They killed Pompey and presented his head to Caesar as a gift, thinking this would please the great Roman general. It did not please him. It horrified him. Caesar arrived in Alexandria with his soldiers, angry and disappointed. And suddenly, Egypt was at the center of the most powerful man in the world's attention. Cleopatra understood immediately what this meant. This was her moment. This was her chance. The discovery of this opportunity changed everything. But getting to Caesar was not simple. Her enemies controlled the palace. She was not allowed to enter Alexandria. So she thought of something bold, something completely unexpected. The story of how Cleopatra reached Julius Caesar is one of the most famous moments in ancient history. She could not enter the royal palace in Alexandria safely. Her brother's soldiers would arrest her immediately. So she made a daring plan. According to the ancient writer Plutarch, she had herself wrapped inside a large cloth sack, or possibly a rolled carpet, and was carried through the city gates by a trusted servant named Apollodorus. He brought the bundle directly to Caesar's private rooms in the palace, and there, before the most powerful man in the Roman world, Cleopatra appeared. What happened next surprised everyone. Caesar was not just impressed by her courage, he was deeply moved by her intelligence, her knowledge, and her ability to speak and argue with great clarity and skill. She spoke to him in Latin, his own language. She told him her story. She explained the injustice done to her. And she made a case for why helping her was not just an act of kindness, but a smart political decision. Caesar was convinced. He decided to support Cleopatra's return to the throne. This led to a short but fierce conflict in Alexandria, sometimes called the Alexandrian War, in which Caesar fought against the forces loyal to Ptolemy XIII. Eventually, Ptolemy fled and drowned in the Nile River. Cleopatra was restored as queen. But she did not rule alone now. She had an alliance with Rome and a close personal bond with Julius Caesar himself. Together they had a son, whom the Egyptians called Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. Cleopatra was not simply a queen held up by a powerful man. She was a partner in strategy. She traveled with Caesar to Rome, where her presence caused both fascination and controversy. For Cleopatra, every relationship was also a chess move in the great game of keeping Egypt independent and strong. In 44 BC, everything changed again. Julius Caesar was assassinated in Rome, stabbed by a group of senators who feared he wanted to become a king. When news of his death reached Cleopatra in Rome, she understood the danger immediately. Without Caesar's protection, her position in Rome was impossible. She returned to Egypt. Back in Alexandria, she focused on ruling her kingdom with full attention. She worked to improve the lives of her people. She made decisions about trade, agriculture, and religious festivals. She showed herself to her subjects as the goddess Isis in human form, a deeply meaningful symbol in Egyptian religion. The people of Egypt saw in her not just a ruler, but a divine protector. But the world outside Egypt was not calm. After Caesar's death, Rome was divided. On one side was Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. On the other side was Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted generals. These two men eventually divided the Roman world between them. Antony took control of the east, which meant Egypt was in his territory. In 41 BC, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in the city of Tarsus. He expected her to come and explain herself, like a subject answering to a master. Instead, Cleopatra arrived on a magnificent ship, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, accompanied by music, perfume, and golden decorations. It was not the arrival of someone who felt inferior. It was the arrival of a queen who knew her own value. This meeting in Tarsus began one of history's most famous partnerships. Antony was captivated, and Cleopatra saw in Antony exactly what she had seen in Caesar, a powerful Roman ally who could help her protect Egypt and perhaps even expand its influence. Their alliance would last for years and produce children together. But Rome was watching. The years that Cleopatra spent with Mark Antony were some of the most politically complicated of her life. Antony was one of the 3 rulers of the Roman world, but his relationship with Cleopatra made his Roman colleagues deeply suspicious. In Rome, Octavian used this relationship as a weapon. He told the Roman people that Antony had been seduced by a foreign queen. He said Antony had forgotten his Roman identity and become an Egyptian puppet. This was not entirely true, but it was powerful propaganda. Antony did make decisions that weakened his position in Rome. He gave away territories to Cleopatra and her children, calling her the Queen of Kings. He seemed to many Romans to be giving parts of the empire to a foreign power. And Octavian used every one of these moments to turn public opinion against Antony. Meanwhile, Cleopatra worked hard to strengthen Egypt. She built up the navy. She stored grain. She developed alliances with neighboring kingdoms. She was preparing for a possible conflict with Octavian, because she could read the signs clearly. War was coming. It arrived in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium near the coast of Greece. The combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian's fleet in a great naval battle. The outcome was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Their ships were outmaneuvered. Their forces began to lose cohesion. And then, in a moment that historians still debate today, Cleopatra's ships turned and withdrew from the battle. Antony followed her. Whether this was a planned retreat or a terrible mistake, no one knows for certain. But the result was clear. They had lost the battle, and their ability to fight Octavian from a position of strength was gone. They sailed back to Egypt, and the shadow of Octavian's power followed close behind them. After the defeat at Actium, Octavian moved quickly. He led his forces toward Egypt. Antony's soldiers, sensing that the war was over, began to surrender or change sides. Antony himself was devastated. He had lost almost everything. And then a terrible misunderstanding made things even worse. A message reached Antony, incorrectly telling him that Cleopatra was already dead. Overcome with grief, Antony fell on his sword. He was mortally wounded. He was brought to where Cleopatra was hiding, inside her own mausoleum, the great tomb she had been preparing. He died in her arms. Now Cleopatra was alone. Octavian entered Alexandria and took control. He allowed Cleopatra to remain alive for a time because he wanted to bring her back to Rome as a trophy of his victory. He imagined the spectacle of the famous Egyptian queen walking in chains through the streets of Rome. Cleopatra understood this completely. She had seen it happen to others. She was not going to allow it to happen to her. She sent a message to Octavian, asking to be allowed to perform burial rites for Antony. Her request was granted. And then, on August 12th, in the year 30 BC, Cleopatra ended her own life. She was 39 years old. The ancient sources say she used the bite of an asp, a small Egyptian cobra, a symbol of royal power and divine protection in Egyptian culture. Whether this is exactly true, we cannot know for certain. But what we do know is this: Cleopatra chose her own ending. She refused to be a prisoner. She refused to be humiliated. In her final act, she was fully and completely herself, a queen, a ruler, and a woman of extraordinary will. With the death of Cleopatra, the age of the pharaohs came to an end. Egypt became a province of Rome. The dynasty of the Ptolemies, which had lasted nearly 300 years, was finished. Octavian, who later called himself Augustus Caesar, became the first emperor of Rome. He had won. But history remembers Cleopatra, not him, with a kind of wonder and deep respect. Why? Because her story is not just about power. It is about intelligence, courage, and the deep human desire to remain free. Cleopatra ruled in a world controlled by men and by armies. She had no army strong enough to fight Rome alone. But she had her mind. She had her languages. She had her understanding of people, of politics, of timing. She used everything she had for as long as she could. And even at the very end, she made her own choice. She was not perfect. She made mistakes. She was sometimes ruthless. She lived in a world where cruelty was often necessary to survive. But she was also brilliant, deeply educated, and genuinely committed to the strength and dignity of Egypt and its people. Her story is a lesson for all of us. The tools we have, our knowledge, our words, our ability to listen and to learn, these are often more powerful than weapons. And now, my friend, I want to speak to you directly for a moment. You just listened to this entire story in English. You understood it. You followed Cleopatra's journey from a young princess in a dangerous palace all the way to the last queen of Egypt. That is not a small thing. That is real progress. Every time you sit down and listen to a story in English, you are learning quietly and naturally. Your ears are growing stronger. Your vocabulary is growing richer. So please, keep coming back. Every story on this channel is a new door, and you are welcome to walk through it. If today's journey moved you, leave a comment below. Tell me what part of Cleopatra's story you found most powerful. And share this episode with someone who is also on this English learning adventure. This is Storyline English, and I will see you in the next story.